Hello, and welcome to the third grade's writing preview for the first 6 weeks. I'm Sonia Burrow, the writing specialist here in HEB, and I will be walking you through your curriculum for this first unit. To start with, let's look at the grammar really quickly and what you'll be covering in your first 6 weeks with students. You will see that I have listed all the TEKs along the side, and you'll see which ones you're going to be covering with your students. So you'll be doing 3.11 DI, complete, simple, and compound sentences with subject-verb agreement. Singular, plural, common, and proper nouns, which is 3.11 DIII. Pronouns, including subjective, objective, and possessive cases. And then capitalization of official titles of people, holidays, and geographical names and places. And you're going to spend two different lessons on that because there's more things that they need to know. And we want to make sure that once we have taught these concepts to the students, that we're holding them accountable and reviewing them, but not reteaching them. So we want to make sure that we've taught them well so that we can spend the time reviewing. So we know that when it comes to those capitalization rules, sometimes the kids get confused. So by teaching it early in the year, you'll have time to continually review it and support students as they grow in their understanding. So on patterns of power, we want to make sure that we're spending our 5 days appropriately on our piece. So we know that it's a 10-minute lesson. So on day 1 is your notice day. You'll invite your students to look at the sentence for author's purpose, the why, and the author's craft, the how. We're going to have the students study the sentence with guidance from the teacher. And they discover the convention that they will be working with, and it is known as the focus phrase. So what we want is for them to discover it, so we don't want to just hand it to them before we start our lesson. So instead of saying our focus phrase for the week is, we want to instead get the kids to look at the sentence, determine it, and then say, we think that the focus phrase is going to be about contractions or capitalization of people or whatever it is. And then you bring out the focus phrase and say, yes, you're right. Or, oh, well, actually, we're looking at this. So some of the questions you might ask your students to help them along the way is, what do you notice? And if your students are focusing completely on capitalization and punctuation, you may want to say something like, we all seem to notice that the sentence starts with a capital letter and ends with an end mark. Those are great notices, but let's focus in on the middle of the sentence and what other things could we notice. When you're asking them to notice, you can have them turn to their partner and talk before you call on students. This makes everyone participate more in the learning. So you may say something like, okay, now that you've had a chance to notice, I want you to turn to your partner. Partner A, please tell them something you noticed. Partner B, what did you notice? And then call on a handful of students to give you notices for the group. We want to hang up the focus phrase after the students discover it. Make sure it's big enough that the students can see that focus phrase and can continue to look at that focus phrase as you move throughout the year until you feel like the students have really mastered that skill, because that really becomes the rule that you expect them to follow. On day 2 is your compare. You're going to invite students to reflect on the focus phrase and then using a plus delta to compare the two. So we want to start by saying, boys and girls, what was our focus phrase from yesterday? Why is that important? Turn to your neighbor and tell them something you learned about the sentence yesterday. Great. Now let's compare it to a new sentence. Remember, our focus phrase is still what? Have them say it again. Students should look for how the grammar skill is used in a similar way in both sentences, but they should also notice how the sentences are different. And you're going to ask questions like, how are they alike and different, and do a plus delta. On day 3 is your imitate. Teachers will do a think aloud as they model how they would imitate the sentence. Then students attempt the same grammar focus. This activity allows the students to encode the new grammar rule through the writing process. This can be done as a whole class activity, a group work, partners, or independently. So at the beginning of the year, you may choose to do it as a whole class, or you may come across a grammar rule that's more difficult or a sentence structure that's a little bit harder, and you may choose to do that one whole class. Other times you may have them work in a group, partners, or independently based on the skill level you're asking the students. You're going to say, let's try it out, and then you want them to share. This way, the students can see more examples of that grammar rule being used correctly. On day 4 is your edit day. Students study variations of the original sentence. They look at changes and how those changes affect the meaning. As students study the variations in the original sentence, teachers can share insight into how the slight changes can affect the meaning for the reader. Questions you might ask is, what changed? What effect does that change have? In 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, we do ask that as you go through and you edit those sentences, you use the editing order that we've given called editor's eyes, capitalization, punctuation, sounds right, spelling, commas, and apostrophes, to help the students have a way to look at a sentence correctly and not skip something that they may not be strong in. So many students are strong in capitalization and punctuation, but sometimes they have a hard time reading a sentence fluently. They add the letters on that are missing. They are not able to read it correctly, or they read it correctly, but they don't notice the spelling errors, or they're able to do all that, but when it comes to looking at commas, apostrophes, and other special marks, they struggle with that. So we want to make sure we give them a structure that allows them to check all components of the sentence. On day 5, it's your apply day. Look for opportunities to apply the new skill in authentic writing. As they're working through their own writing, we want to see as much as possible them applying those skills in their writing, and you as a teacher will be looking for ways that they are doing that. Students will encode their learning by applying it in their own writing. Until they're actually able to perform that task on their own when not instructed to, they have not completely mastered the skill. So if we think about writing a compound subject, doing a worksheet over it is not the same as them authentically writing it in their own writing. So maybe they have 2 characters in their story and you say, you know what, it would be really interesting if you actually had a sentence that had them combined. How could you write the sentence so that you share the proper nouns, the names of these 2 characters in the sentence to help the reader understand who did the action? Once the kids can do that and begin doing that on their own, you know that they understand the role. So you would ask, show me in your writing where you are able to apply the skill. Now, sometimes the skill that you're teaching does not apply to their writing. So you may choose to give them an index card and ask them to write something with that skill in it. That is always something that can be done, but it is much better to have it in their authentic writing. So some of the questions you may want to ask your students as you're working through it: how does blank affect how we read the sentence aloud? So when we think about punctuation, those things are read aloud and they make a difference. How does blank affect how we read the sentence with our eyes? When we read it with our eyes, capitalization really pops out, right? The quote marks around something are important for both. We want to make sure the kids understand the difference. Why do you think the author included blank? So if you're looking at adjectives or adverbs or prepositional phrases, they're including specific word choices for a reason. That might be a question you ask them. How does blank help the reader understand this sentence? How does the apostrophe in Sonia's cat, right? How does that help the reader understand the sentence? What do you think the focus phrase is? Repeat the focus phrase often during the lesson and hang it up so students can refer to it. Patterns of power planning. So one of the key features in Jeff Anderson's work on patterns of power is the planning process. It is extremely important that the planning be done in advance of the PowerPoint being open with students. I know that we all know that planning is the biggest part of a successful lesson with students. So you can see in the corner that we give you the TEAK. The objective is actually the focus phrase, so you don't have to worry about like, what is the focus phrase? I do put that in as the objective. Then you have your invitation to notice, which is going to have the PowerPoint for the week. And then underneath it, there's lesson plan framework. You do not have to use this lesson plan framework. However, it is important to have some sort of lesson plan framework. This particular lesson plan framework works for the whole week. So once you fill it out, it is done for the week. Okay, what is the mentor sentence for the week? So you really want to look at that mentor sentence. What is it? What does it have in it that they might look at? What is the focus phrase? Then what prior skills do my students need to have in order to understand the skill? So I use pronouns to substitute for nouns is the one that is shown here. And they will not be able to do this work if they don't know what a noun is. So if a pronoun substitutes for a noun, they have to know what a noun is. What leading questions might I need to ask to help students? So if students are struggling with this process, or they're only focusing in on a few things and they're not getting to what you're trying to get to on the focus phrase, you may need to lead them with breadcrumbs along the way. I wonder why the author chose to use this word, right? I wonder why the author made this craft move. Those types of questions will help move the children towards what you're looking at. What can I learn about my students' grammar skills? Through their notices. Now, this is one that I love about this process. Although you may be working on pronouns, students may be noticing other things. They may notice adjectives or adverbs. They may notice past tense verbs. They may notice different pieces of that sentence that you're not focused in for that day, but it tells you something about their understanding of grammar. So just kind of keep a mental note of those things that they are able to notice. Who's making those notices? Are many of the students noticing that, or just a handful? What anchor charts do my students need to help them with this skill? So we always want to make sure we have the anchor charts necessary, especially when we're doing like prepositions, those types of things. Kids need those anchor charts to help them. So kind of think ahead, what do I need? So it's already prepared and can go up. You may need it again, or you may want to leave it hanging because the kids are still going to be using these focus phrases even when you're not covering it that week. What imitation sentence can I create to push my students' thinking? Okay. So that last one, we want to make sure that when we ask them to make an imitation sentence, we already have one in mind for ourselves that we're going to create in advance. And we want to make sure that we have that thought process behind what am I trying to get them to understand about creating a imitation sentence that's different from the original and different than the compare sentence that pushes their thinking. All right, so this year, you're going to notice that there are some changes to the curriculum. So we have changes to the editing and revising for you. Teachers will now find editing and revising embedded within the curriculum with specific lessons to support changes that will be put into place in the 2022-2023 school year. So we know in 2022-2023, the STAR test will contain editing, revising, and reading. It's one test. And so we want to make sure that the changes that are necessary to make in the curriculum happen now so that you guys have a chance to flesh it out, see how it goes, and give feedback to me as necessary. So some of the changes are as follows. Lessons will reflect skills necessary for mastery of STAR type questions. Lessons will allow for building in remediation of skills. These lessons will be between bends in your unit of study. So I want you to think when you have bend 1, and then when you go to bend 2, there will be a day in between that's either going to focus on editing or revising. During the course of the year, students will have 19 days for editing and revising as standalone lessons. So, that's quite a bit of time that we're spending just breaking up time for that. So when we look, there's a revising lesson listed here so you can kind of see. You're going to see this as lesson, and this says Rally Education Teacher Edition. So it's teacher pages 8 through 11 in this whole class instructional model for students how to evaluate combining and separation of sentences. And then there's an anchor chart there for you. And then it would have continued down, but it's on the side here. It says this lesson will take the entire time. Reminder that when revising sentences to look for the 3 rules. The new sentence must maintain the meaning of the original sentence. The new sentence must be grammatically correct, and the new sentence should not repeat phrases that could be combined in another way. So that lesson, that Rally Education material will come out this fall, and you will have access to that. And you will use that for a full class lesson. So that will take the place of a writing lesson that day. Okay, so we want to make sure that you're getting the time you need. Before, you would have found some of these things in the optional category over on the side of grammar saying optional activities. And now this is going to be built in as a lesson. Okay, so looking at your actual curriculum, you will see here's that revising activity. There's the take, objective, there's your lesson, anchor chart. And then we want to look over here on the grammar side. On the grammar side, you'll see our grammar rule that we're covering. We can see again, the objective is your focus phrase, your lesson, your plan, and then you will also see some included in here. Review this PowerPoint over the course of the week. So you have a PowerPoint that's going to have different things in it. So you just pick maybe a slide a day to cover. You have Brainpop listed in here, and then you have a graphic organizer that you can use later on in the week as well. So you're going to see a little bit more put in there that maybe you weren't, you didn't see prior to. Okay. So then you're going to move in. You'll see on day 15, we're back to a lesson from units of study because we are in a new bend, and it will continue through until we get to the end of another bend, and then you will see we would move on. Now, as on the end of a week, you're going to see your grammar listed and apply and celebrate here, but then you have your assessments, and down at the bottom you have your homophone lists. Okay, make sure that you're looking at that. I will embed them in as possible for you, but we want to make sure that you are looking for commonly misspelled words that are homophones that the students are missing that you cover with them. So you have this huge bank of homophones to work with. You also may want to choose some that you know are just issues for the kids. It's and it's, there, our and are, or hour and hour, things like that, where the kids sometimes mix those up, and we want to just make sure that we are being proactive with those. Okay, so here are some of those pieces that have changed in the curriculum as well. I already talked about the homophones. On day 11, you're going to see on your composition what you're covering is session 4, crafting true stories, but then you see at the bottom it says reading, writing, connection. In Grandma and the Gourd, the author writes the story in scenes. They spend time in the village with the fox, bear, tiger, and the daughter. Point out how the author, and it continues on to next line about how the author uses scenes to develop it, which goes with that session for crafting true stories. Noticing the objective, it says students will learn that one way writers draw readers in is by telling their story in scenes rather than summaries. So what I'm doing is including some of those connection pieces to help you make the bridge between your reading and writing. On day 19, you're going to see the same thing. You have an assessment there as well. Observe students writing to determine if students are able to elaborate. And so you can use that assessment or another one, but we want to assess that ability. And then you have the reading, writing connection. Notice how in Kukulus, I apologize if I did not say that right, on page 106, the author adds elaboration to help the reader understand what is happening in the story. And then I have put in quotes what was done. Okay, so again, that applies directly to what we're doing in writing. So I'm trying to make those connections and help you out a little bit with that. And then day 13, we just have that assessment piece. And then on day 13 in the grammar section, you have homophones. So some of those are changes that hopefully will help you along the way as you're working with students, making those connections across reading and writing. Changes to the curriculum, you will also notice that there's Brainpop embedded in the grammar. So if I was able to find a Brainpop that fit that grammar skill, those are in there and they are optional. You may not want to do them on Monday. You may want to choose a day where your pop lesson doesn't take as long and say, well, we're going to review this, okay? So they're in there for you just to help support you. So your first unit is going to be crafting true stories. There are 20 sessions, 4 bends. You have built-in assessments. Checklists and exemplars are provided. You have the reading, writing connections made. The editing, revising days built in to support the changes to the STAR test in 2022 to 2023. Narrative writing is the foundation of all other genres, so it is important to make the connections between the writing students are doing and the books they are reading. Okay, so it is our foundation for all other writing. So when we think about our units of study, I have created a Canvas course on open sessions for 3rd grade so that you can go in and do your open session work before the unit starts. There are 2 ways for you to enroll in the course. So I will not enroll you, but you can enroll yourself. And you can see those 2 options listed below. Okay. So we just want you to have that as an opportunity. All of your open sessions will be in your Canvas course so that you are able to go in and watch that instruction. If you have a teammate who's also teaching that same thing and you want to do this work with them instead, where you read through the welcome to the unit, you look at the bends, you look at an exemplar, checklist, and you try to figure out like, what is the sequence? What are you covering prior to? You're welcome to do that. That is the best way to do this work. But I know that sometimes we don't have a partner to do that with, or they're busy and you're busy. So I want to give you an opportunity to have someone to do that work with, and that is me. So Canvas course, open sessions, and this is the enrollment. Each new unit will be posted in Canvas course and published 3 weeks before the unit begins. These courses are there to help you get a better overview of the unit and prepare for the genre you will be teaching. In 22-23, new STAR questions will be part of the ELA STAR test. These items may include essays and/or student responses to passages. So we have not gotten a full blueprint of what that test is going to look like for 3rd grade, but this is what we have been given as data. Sample questions show students responding to information, opinion, narrative texts, so all of them, in a manner similar to a literary essay, but not limited to literary essay style writing. A well-rounded curriculum covers all genres, will support our students' understanding of the writing process. So when you look at the curriculum over the course of the year, you're going to see students really spending time in all the genres to prepare them so that when they get to 4th grade and they are taking this new formatted test, they have a really good sense of those genres. And 2nd grade will be doing the same for you. So we want to just benefit our co-teachers in the grade above us as we work through this change in our testing. Just making it work together. Remember, your patterns of power is 10-minute grammar lesson. You're exposing students to a focus phrase, an example of good writing, and reinforcing the skills students need to know. In your mini lesson, you're going to provide students with a tip, strategy, or tool that they will use during independent writing. They need to write every day, so students are practicing a new technique or getting support from you as you conference with them. During conferencing, when working with students, you're going to be looking for patterns that show the students are able to transfer what you're teaching to their own writing. And through the conferencing, you'll be able to determine if students are able to apply their new skill in both pop and mini lessons to their writing. You can then use the data to determine next steps. So your code word for your preview is lavender. I hope this preview helped you along the way, and I hope that you have are able to sign up for your Canvas course so that you can participate in open sessions this year. If you have any questions or need any support going forward in the year, please feel free to contact me. Again, if you need anything from me, please feel free to contact me, Sonia Burrow at hebisd.edu. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a fabulous beginning of the school year. We look forward to working with you this year.